You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
This is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and I am most excited to have Lori Fetrick, Ice from the American Gladiators, on the show, and your dog, who I've become acquainted
I
with.
apologize.
No, let's bring the dog into it. I've become acquainted with your dog because that's what podcasts are. You become acquainted with your life, April, and your dog.
I got dogs, plural.
Dogs,
I've got 4 of them.
I missed the fact that you had 4, but
I've got 4, and so I'm gonna try to keep them like at a bay, as far as being a little quiet.
Normally the cats invade this podcast. I don't know what, it's normally cats. So, but dogs most welcome. But, Lori, like I said, excited to be able to chat with you. And for folks, the great classic show American Gladiators has received some more recent attention, ESPN documentary, the Netflix Muscles and Mayhem, unauthorized story of American Gladiators. Finished watching that for the second time last night. That was the type of Netflix content that's basically like that perfect meal that's served right in front of you and being like, you want another one? So
Yep, I agree.
what's before I go on too much, there's plenty to chat about you, but
Right.
About the doc and about the spike of energy around that, and maybe digging into the stories of what went down on American Gladiators in your experience. What's been the recent journey and impact for you on having that Netflix documentary go out and going back to the Gladiators?
Having that Netflix documentary come out has really sparked, like you said, the nostalgia of the American Gladiators. Everybody's trying to, it seems like nowadays people are more and more trying to reach back and kind of get that comfortable, nostalgic feel of when times were a little bit simpler, and it wasn't so, everything was so, everybody was looking over. Right now, it's like everything's looking over everybody's shoulder, and you can't say this and you can't say that. I mean, but that's what everybody loves about going back into the 90s and the nostalgic period, is because it was like this big, huge free for all, and it was a lot of fun. And so what I'm getting right now is I'm getting a lot of, I would say, I don't know, support is a good word,
Yeah.
as far as when it comes to the fans and everything in the American Gladiators, just, they're all reaching out, whether it be my social media, email, my podcast, website, just how much that the American Gladiators impacted their life back then. And so that's one thing to where I like to, go back and, talk to people about this and how it affected their life. And, I get a lot of things like, you made me feel like I could be stronger and I could be this. And it was a great time, back then.
Yeah.
We were especially the females, because if you think about it, we were bodybuilders, we were ahead of the time, we were, into that fitness realm. And it wasn't super acceptable back then, being that female big bodybuilder. And so, but it gave a lot of females the permission, I think, is what I'm getting and what I'm gathering, to be strong females and to be authentic, be themselves. So that's one thing that I'm getting from this documentary, to where people are reaching out, 25, 30 years later, of how much we impacted it and helped change some lives. So that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, there's that power there to it, and I found in watching the documentary, which involved, recollection of like different things, how it just felt different as a show. And
Mm-hmm.
the when you were talking about, the camaraderie, which is visible in a lot of the video between the men and the women, was that, there was a good vibe around. I mean, it wasn't my experience, but like that type of dynamic isn't always the case. And
Yeah, we gelled pretty good as a team. There was a few people that, a little drama here and there, but as an actual team, I mean, we really kind of came together. I didn't have a big family. I had just, one sister older than me, 3 years older. So to have like, we talk about like the brothers and the sisters of the team. I didn't have a big family growing up, so this was something that was extremely super cool for me. I mean, even staying together and in communication 30 years later, I mean, Laser and myself I mean, he's like my big brother. I love that man. And Nitro, same thing. And, there are just certain personalities and certain gladiators that we really stayed in contact with. I mean, Dallas, she's one of my best friends. And it just made for an amazing journey through that time to have a family with you doing it,
yeah,
which was
yeah.
amazingly cool.
Yeah, I'm a completionist on the original run of American Gladiators, which I think most people who watched it were into it ended up being like no matter what. And I did, and this is for listeners too. I typed what I did before coming on. I typed ice, best of reel. Holy shit! I saw a woman run at you. It was like the Crash Test Dummies commercials, right? Like,
Exactly.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, I might remember that, but
Yeah.
folks, if you want to get a little bit of the taste, some folks have done some editing for the best of ice on YouTube. I wanted to ask you a unique question. Lori Fetrick and Ice. How much? I know you kind of got that persona and such. Related to the show, but how much? How much of Lori is Ice? How much? How much Lori is in Ice?
A lot, actually, to be honest with you. I'm extremely competitive. I've got that fire in my stomach that, I'm constantly competing. I'm competing in everyday life, to be quite honest with you. It seems
Yeah,
like I'm such a hustler to where it's like, that's just me. But,
yeah,
I would honestly say a lot. I think what happened is I just took the ice character and like just made her bigger and
yeah,
better, and more competitive and more fierce. That's really all I did, So therefore, yeah, there's a lot of Lori inside of Ice, no doubt. And
yeah,
I just, I like to have a lot of fun. I'm still a child at heart. I always like laugh, and one of my favorite movies is Hook. It's like just I never wanted to grow up. And so, therefore, it's like when I became Ice on the American Gladiators, that was like my playground, And so I enjoyed every single moment of that, every single hit, every single just in the girl's face. I love that. I love that. And it's funny. I mean, I usually, some of my friends would say something different, but, a lot of people don't like the confrontations in life. And sometimes I enjoy them, and I'll hit them
yeah.
head on. And other times it just depends on what the confrontation is, of course. But other than that, I do. I enjoy that. I like that. I like everything about it. So I don't know. Yeah, I'd say definitely. There's a lot. There's a lot of Lori and Ice and Lori. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I like it too because I doing an art and philosophy podcast here, and talking to art a lot of times is like one of the things that just fascinates me is like the artist persona, right? So the,
Hmm.
the the creator within that too. So like I would see within that too, like you have this character and this is you and this isn't you, and I mean you just hit it, and it's clear that you're an entertainer. And I know you've talked about like when you talk about things that you think of yourself doing in the episodes I heard, it's in front. It is, the spectacle, and that's just like a really cool piece, because with the artist persona, sometimes I think of where it's like, the absolute counter, right? So my life is so oppressive. I'm stuck in a box, all this type of thing. But on Saturday and Sunday night, the complete opposite of that, is up there on stage.
It's interesting. You're right. I mean, I've met quite a few actors that, I mean, there's one actor in particular that I'm, in my mind, it's like when I met him, I mean, huge actor. But when I met him, I was just like, oh my God, you're exactly the same way you are in person as you are on screen and with all
Yeah.
your movies. Maybe the scenario changed to where it's like, now you're, back in cowboy and Indian times, and you're saving the day. But overall, your entire personality and how you are is exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting. And I've met quite a few actors just like that.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just the environment and the scenarios have changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I wanted to talk about your creativity as well with the podcast, and
mhm.
and the work you do there, and just talk about podcast. And I've done this show for 4 years, and throughout it, just kind of learning about what podcasting is, and it's growing. And heck, if you don't know, folks, everybody's listening to podcasts now. It is like the radio for folks to listen to. It's just growing.
It's your
What
own personal radio station.
Isn't it? Isn't it? So,
Yeah.
well, tell us about that. You're newer to going in with it. I've listened to all the shows in Chilling with Ice. I mean, it seems to me, listening on the other side of things, it's a natural thing for you. But what's been your experience all of a sudden being like, all right, podcast time? What's that mean for you?
Podcast time means go time, means I'm on. It's like turn the switch on. Um, and podcasting, like you said, it is. It's like your own private radio station. And when I first started podcasting, I was nervous. Oh my God, I was so nervous. My first 2, 3, 4 episodes, and I had to keep in my mind that, oh my God, I can go out and I can edit this. I can take out what I want. I can edit this, but I've actually never. I mean, I have a producer, but yet she has barely touched any of my podcasts. It's like, let's kind of keep them raw. Let's keep them, very authentic and out there.
Yeah.
And I want to watch the process of me growing, throughout, all of my shows. I'm up to, I think I looked yesterday and I had like 30 shows on the books right now on Chilling with Ice.
That was quick.
Yeah, but I mean, I started the very first one came out on my birthday, March 28th, and I've pretty much put one out every week. And I think as far as actually podcasting, I am becoming, you become more comfortable, obviously with your guest, researching them, finding out what's, really cool, what your audience wants to hear. But at the same time, it's kind of like what I want to hear. It's the questions that I want to ask that I think that everybody else out there might be. I mean, we're pretty much so similar as far as like the questions we want to ask people. So I ask the questions that I want to ask, and having my audience, obviously in the back of my mind what they want to hear. But it's the fascination of the stories that I love to hear.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I'm getting some feedback from my audience and my fans that they want to hear more of me, as far as a podcaster. So, I think what we're going to be doing is probably like once every other month, I'll have somebody come on and interview me.
Yeah.
And on my podcast and talk about my past guests and what are the favorite ones I had and what stuck out, things like that. But I never really had any formal broadcast training, which I think would have probably helped a lot. But yet at the same time, I don't know. It's kind of like learning golf sometimes, It's like I'm a golfer. So I started with golf lessons the minute I picked up a club. I wanted to learn how to swing, and I wanted to swing, as professionally as I could at that point in time. But it's like there's a lot of people out there, and I'm going to compare it to this, which is really interesting. But if you have a golfer that's been on the course for 2-3 years and they've developed all these bad habits, and then all of a sudden you come in and you have some professional training, they have to undo all those bad habits and restart again. And sometimes it's harder to undo those bad habits. So I don't know, maybe I should have gotten a little professional broadcast training in the very beginning. I don't know.
I don't think so. I mean, I do the show. I don't have training, but I tell you, for me, it was finding out about honed skills that you didn't know you had honed in other ways. So my day job, I'm a union rep, right? So I get thrown. So first of all, most of my membership, 2 out of 3 are women, right? So I'm involved in a lot of conversation, probably far more than most people would imagine of women. But not only that, there's this, when I meet people, there's a stress, there's a something going on, and I have to establish a rapport with folks, and an honest rapport as a rep. So I had done this, Lori, I'd done this thousands of times. And so when I got on the show, I was like, well, the early interviews sound much different. That's not my point. I wasn't a well-oiled machine going in, but I didn't know what I had learned until I was like on the mic, and people would be like, how long you been doing this? Where you do your training? I'm like, I did my training amongst the members. Like, they're coming to me with their life situations, and
I think you're right. You're absolutely right. You hit on a point. It's like, how quickly can you build that rapport? And if you could build that rapport, you can have that conversation. And that's one of the things that on my podcast, I wanted to have conversations. I didn't want to just do an interview. Like question 1, question 2, question 3, I wanted to listen to the guest. I wanted to have the conversation, and maybe some of those questions that I had all written down, which, by the way, I do every single podcast, like the night before, I kind of go back over my notes. There you go. Exactly. You pull up your notes and you go, okay, these are all the questions, but let's be honest, 9 out of 10 times you never ever hit all those questions because you're just into a conversation, and you just let it flow. And I think that's the other thing that people are starting, they're really enjoying on my podcast is just the flow of the podcast.
I think, so what I like that's underneath your show. Yeah. And heck, folks, go there for the great stories, American Gladiator stories, like all that's there. But the piece where, is why I keep listening, quite honestly, is that is what you said about how you go in, and that I hear you going into the larger things about life, and not just those stories, but like, who was it that you wanted to be, right? And like, are you that now? Or like, you had this experience, it was super intense. Like, would you like to change a lot of that with what like these questions that really get people being like, man, how am I living? And also connected to that, Lori, the health, wellness, people looking at you. How do you have the $1 million smile and still look as great as you do right now? Right. So like, here's what I know about these things. But
God, if I could just make $1 million on that $1 million smile, everybody tells me I have.
I'll be your agent. I'm
there we go. In. You're on, Ken.
In. I didn't even know it was going to go 20 minutes in. And
look at that. You're already my agent. I love it.
But the piece I do love about the show is what's underneath, and what drives it is the stories, is about life, is about the why the fuck we doing this, or why we're doing that, and who we want to be. And that exploration for me is expansionist, and that's why. Well, keep going all there.
I mean, think about it. We're all so curious about everybody else's life, you know, because it's like my sister. It blows my mind. My sister is my sister's very smart, very intelligent, and you would never in a million years think that she loves the Housewives of New York, or let's say one of those shows. And it just cracks me up because her personality, it's like, are you kidding me? You watch this? And she tells me, she goes, I just find it fascinating about their lives, and sometimes when I see their lives, it actually, I mean, I'm not saying that this is, how I bring people on my podcast, but yet she goes, sometimes the more um, just screwed up that they are, it makes me feel like my life is more normal.
Sure.
I just laugh, and I'm like,
Sure.
wow, that's so interesting. You say that.
Well, it's like that kind of live day, and also like on the other flip side of it, I talked to I had a guest on her named Cynthia Framson, and she's in a princess punk band from Sweden. She's also does this incredible stop motion photography, not photography, puppetry, and like the kind of claymation and all this. But she's in her 20s, and she would just drop down. She's like I set out in my life to create as much time for the flow state in my day. Like she's like a young artist, and she's like, I want to have my life set up the way where I can have the most opportunities to be in the flow state and to be myself and to be right there. And I was like, holy shit. Like
Yeah.
right there. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
how do
And
you
she's
how
so
do you do
young.
life? Yeah.
She's so young thinking this too. I mean, that's amazing. But think about it. I remember when I was in my teenage years and going into my 20s, I was so creative and open, and I was just welcoming in life and every
What were you
aspect of it.
doing? How was that being expressed at the time? What were you up to like around that time? Like open and in creativity? What were you
I
thinking?
was, it's just, think about, I wasn't jaded. It wasn't even,
Yeah.
it wasn't so much what I was thinking. It was just life in general. I wasn't jaded yet. Yet. You like that word? Yet. I'm not jaded now, but I'm not jaded now. I'm just saying that, you're so young, and you're molding yourself, and you're just growing, and all these things are coming in, and they're so, I mean, for me anyway, it was exciting and it was new. And the more that came at me, the more creative I got. And I mean, I was into sports, and I was an athlete and everything, but yet at the same time, I was drawing, I was writing. I wanted to be a cartoonist when I was young. I love cartoons. And when that kind of changed, I want to go into architecture. I wanted to design buildings and do all that. So it's like my life has completely, I mean, it's like changed and molded. But yet when you're in that state and when you're growing, you're not, the world hasn't, and I'll say it again, the world hasn't come out you and jaded you and hadn't thrown all these things at you, to where it's like you start becoming, and it's sad, but as adults, you start becoming numb. You start becoming, you have your defense mechanisms, and you put your
Yeah.
walls up. But when you're young and you're growing and you're at that stage going into your 20s, you're so open still. Most people are, unless they had some traumatic experience. They're so open, and just, they're accepting of everything, and so they can be more and more creative. It's just too bad that we can't stay there. I mean, some people can, which is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's keep trying to keep that balance as we grow older and go through life. I mean, yeah, I'm in my, you like that? I'm going to say I'm in my late 50s.
Fuck you. Fuck you, you're not. I never did the math before coming on the show. I prepped for this interview, but I didn't even bother. I didn't even bother on the age, and now you're lying to me. Now you're lying to me.
Oh,
Like you're so
God, come on,
comfortable,
Ken,
you're lying to me already.
You know how old I am. But it's fighting off the, for lack of better words, demons. It's fighting those off, and staying in the life, and the joy and the beauty of it, and not letting things get to you.
So when did you see yourself as artist creator? When did you see
At a very
yourself
young
as
age.
artist?
I was a very
Yeah.
young age when I saw myself as an artist and creator. I mean, I was like probably, 14, 15 years old. So I had a good, all the way up into my early 20s. I was still drawing. I was still being super
Yeah, yeah.
creative and still writing. And I mean, again, it's like the world is my oyster. It's just like everything was open to me. And I was extremely excited to go through doors. I mean, to this day, I'm still excited to that. I always
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
that, it's kind of like just staying in the positivity of life, and manifesting what you want.
Yeah.
and never ever losing that. You never want to lose that edge, that young at heart feeling, because that's what keeps you alive and it keeps you young. For me, anyway, it does.
Yeah. It's that drive.
Yeah, it's the drive
So
and the creativity of that.
So I know you're in a few spots, and just recently, like I saw on TikTok, I was like, "Whoa, my goodness! I didn't know you're that big on TikTok." And you were, and I had seen some of them. I'm like, "Okay, well, she's big over there," and it's really cool. I'm a listeners. I'm a patron of
Yes, you
Lori
are. Thank you very much
Fetrick,
for
and
being one of my
yeah,
Patreons.
and the wonderful platform Patreon. And you want to talk a little bit about that, maybe in connection to the show?
Yeah, my Patreon page is a lot of fun. Basically, it's to where, if anybody doesn't know about Patreon is a platform to where you can help creators and artists and things like that help, because most of our stuff that we do out there, we are all self-funded, like we were talking about before your show. I self-fund my podcast and everything. So it's a way for people to get behind artists and creators to actually just help support. So sometimes, it could be like different levels on your Patreon. You have a $5 level, a $10, $20, $30 level, and so on. And so, and you get to have fun with creating these levels for your Patreons. They get like access to my podcast, like let's say a week before. They get the rapid fire questions where they're only on my Patreon, that I do a rapid fire with every guest, but it's not out anywhere else. So that's another little bonus. Autograph photos. I have a private Facebook page, behind the scenes as far as gladiator photos. So it's a lot of fun, and that's really what it is it's just keeping people, kind of like I can talk to them like you and I have talked, message back and forth. And so it's a way to keep me connected to the fans, which is really a lot of
Yeah.
fun. And that's what's nice about Patreon. So a lot of people can actually help support their creators.
Yeah, and there's one of the things, great platform, and I love your content. One of the things in this episode here is American Gladiators, and we got a lot of the brain stuff going on. I know there's some listeners going to want some of that muscle stuff. I used to watch American Gladiators, so I'm your demographic. I'm your demographic,
There we
Lori.
go.
I'm uh I'm at the University of Rhode Island, by the ocean, studying philosophy. Studying philosophy, and in syndication, of course, every night, right? And so we were partiers in general, and didn't party
Yeah.
every day, but many times. In American Gladiators were on, and it was on. And of course, as you might imagine, or thought, as you're competing, unfortunately there may be many college males or anybody out there competing in these events in front of the TV because of what they're seeing. But a big, incredible show. I was in watching the Muscles of Mayhem. I watched the ESPN documentary, which I enjoyed in a particular way. It was almost, for me, like a bit of like an absurdist piece on
Mm-hmm.
Ferraro,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but the Netflix one, in one of the things in watching it was, first of all, it's deeply enjoyable, and to see that, but even after watching it, and I think it's 5 parts in the
Yes.
in the mini series,
Yeah.
I was like, "Holy shit, this must just be scratching the surface." I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, like, the safety issues, or all the stories of the competitors and things like that.
Yeah.
So I felt it was great to have that, but I'm like, "There's a mountain of stories here." How did the Netflix documentary feel for you? Of like, if you're gonna watch something, getting what the gladiators were in that amount of time.
A lot hit the floor. Meaning that all of the gladiators, we were interviewed for about 6, maybe 8 hours. And if you think about all the stories that we had and told within that 6 to 8 hour period interview, and I was interviewed twice, so 16 hours basically. Um, And what they're doing is they're splicing together a story. But you're absolutely right. It left the audience wanting more. It left the audience thinking there's more stories here. Absolutely. And there was a shit ton of stories that hit the floor that they didn't even like bring out because it just didn't fit the storyline, which was unfortunate. However, who knows? Maybe it left an opening for something else, as far as
right,
maybe, yeah, exactly. And, I think with that said, there's a possibility, and I like mentioning this because of the fact it's starting, I'm hoping that it's going to happen, but there's a possibility that there may be a small little American Gladiator tour, and it'll be basically the Muscles of Mayhem tour. Possibly. Now, see,
possibly, everybody, possibly.
Exactly.
This isn't realm of possibility. It's a hypothetical
absolutely.
possibility.
And that's where the manifestation comes into play, to where it's like, if everybody starts manifesting this, it'll happen. But
we already did it. We're good.
There we go. Exactly. Threw it out into the universe. But, there'll be, let's say, 4 or 5 of us out there, and we'll have like a Comic-Con type, Q&A, and we'll get to tell more stories. And we'll get to actually meet our fans, and it'll be in venues, cool little smaller venues, and it'll have the meet and greets. And so this is something that we're actually right now in the talks with, and, discussing the details. But I think that would be kind of cool, because if you think about it, you're right. Muscles of Mayhem, the documentary, it left a lot to the imagination. It left a lot of questions. There's more here. There's more stories. All right. Yeah. So what's cool about that is now we can take the Muscle of Mayhem tour, and we can tell those stories on the road. We can have the meet and greets and meet the fans, and, have the questions and answers. And so that to me excites me. And that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. And that will also answer a lot of the fans' questions that they have.
Yeah,
but you're right. It did. It just you can't, even though it's a 5-part series, they still have to have that format, that story they had to tell. The ESPN documentary, it only touched on Johnny Ferraro's story, which is, the creation of the American Gladiators. And he thinks that, I heard him do an interview, and he's like, well, they the gladiators, they're trying to play gladiators right now. And, the Muscles of Mayhem, it would have never taken off if they didn't use the American Gladiator, name. He's got such a hard on for any of us doing anything, without his permission or without some kind of fee. It's like Johnny's all about the greed. He's all about the money. He's all about, how much am I going to get if you want to use my logo to do anything? It's just like, come on.
Well, let me ask you about, and talking about creativity in art, right? So, like in watching that story, and of course I'm watching as a labor union rep and all that type of stuff, and like that horse shit. Like any situation, it's the workers who fucking make the thing.
Thank you.
It's not the half-baked idea that was developed behind it. I'm sorry. It is the workers. It is the performers. And I see within the story there of what for me is, early reality TV, like the worst setup, the worst abuse as it's set up, because it's a clear, like, playing field almost at that time. You had that real adverse experience. You as a creator, you as a talent, the arrangement, you're seeing figures of yourself all over and all over the place. You have to hustle to get your ass paid in other type of ways to make a go of what should be something. Correct. And I'm asking now with you move into like the creativity and podcast, and like maybe like a more thorough re-engaging, is that adverse experience, how does that inform you right now of making sure you get what you need?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
It's just making sure, like the contracts that we signed back then, and God, it was so, you're right. It was so unheard of. We signed contracts for in perpetuity, which means for life, and I can't even believe that these contracts really even exist nowadays. They should just be thrown out. MGM owns our characters for life. There should be something along the lines to where it's like, okay, after 30 years, whatever, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
But it's not. I mean, they don't have these types of contracts any longer whatsoever. So moving forward in my life and the creativity process and being the actor, the character, however you want to see me, creator, podcasting. It's now just making sure that everything is fair across the board.
yeah,
We're still jumping through hoops, though. Don't get me wrong.
yeah,
Because anything and everything that I do, I have to be very careful on. Can I use my character Ice? Well, I can use my character Ice if it's within, a sentence or something. That's why it's called Chilling with Ice. They can't do anything really about that. It's just constantly looking for
yeah,
angles and ways around that stupid ass, absolutely terrible contract that we signed back in the day. So even like with my podcasting and doing different things and moving into different venues and realms and everything, I've learned a lot. I mean, we knew back then, but here is the problem, Ken. We knew how bad those contracts were, to be quite honest with you. But if we didn't sign them, we didn't play. They'd just go out and get
yeah,
somebody else.
yeah.
So
There
it's like,
was
what do you do?
in or out, right? And it's like,
Exactly.
well, am I going to be on TV? This is the setup, or is somebody else going to be
Yeah.
on TV and not me?
That's really what it came down to.
Yeah,
And it's the unfortunate side of the companies and the big, huge companies that, overtake shit. And it's just like, they don't give a shit about their people. And that's why, like, for instance, in your position, you're a union rep, you're taking care of your people,
yeah,
but there was no union rep to take care of us.
yeah,
And even if
yeah.
they did, we had like little agents here and there, but even if they did come to bat and they tried to do something for us, the big company, the ginormous MGM was like, nope, here's a contract. They either want it or they don't. And
No,
you're
they
right.
had
That's,
business practices from like the 1800s there that
yeah.
you're dealing with
Samuel
as well,
Goldwyn
being
never
like,
negotiated contracts. So
yeah,
Samuel Goldwyn Jr. followed in his father's footsteps, never negotiated contracts. So it just kind of, it kept going down the hill. But now it's just about, trying to make sure that it's fair across the board for everyone and everyone who's involved in whatever scenarios, it
yes,
is.
you deserve you deserve, and I know I can
Thank you.
see and what you do, how hard you work. All right, let's hit you with a not so easy question that is part of the show. What is art? What is art? Tell
What is
me.
art?
Yeah, tell me
Is that
what
what you're
art
asking?
is. Yeah,
As an artist? Oh,
yeah.
creativity,
Creativity.
imagination,
What's yeah? What is? Tell me what it is.
imagination. I mean, well, now you're going to get into this, the philosophy side of things. I mean, I'm not
That's right.
sure.
It's muscles, brain, Lori. I have you on for a reason. Don't back out of it. You said you were an artist when you were a little kid, so don't back out of the question.
I mean, it's allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to be artistic and to be creative and to take whatever it is that you're into and make something of it. To
Yeah,
me, yeah. I mean, it just keeps coming back down to the creativity and being authentic and vulnerable and being able to create without feeling any type of judgment whatsoever.
yeah.
Um,
Doing it.
just being you, doing you.
Do
you know,
people? I know you've mentioned. Uh, I adore film, and sometimes like in a creator mind, I see like somebody in film. So you mentioned like you as a lead. I don't know if people go up to you and say like this is the role you should be, but I've seen for a long time it's the lead on a spaceship science fiction costume. I think in like black and silver, and basically
I'm seeing
the
Star Trek as you're
no no
describing it, which is hysterical.
no, Lori, I mean not Star Trek costume. I mean like future like down and like you're the commander and the scene and the lights is that the character you see yourself on film, or did you want
No, if I
it
were
wasn't
to,
it wasn't the Ellen show
no,
exactly, I'd imagine.
if I had my absolute perfect scenario to where somebody came up and said, "What type of lead role would you want to play?" It would be the Laura Croft character. I mean, she was such a
Yeah.
badass. She was
Yeah.
such a badass, and she just, that character would be absolutely so much fun to play. So that's the type. I would say that would be the type of lead character that I would love to absolutely go after. Um, it's the acting industry has changed right now. It's really
Oh gosh,
changed.
huh?
It's
Yeah.
especially since COVID, everything is online. All auditions are on Zoom. It really sucks. They don't get to meet you in person. They don't get to see that personality. Now all they see is these little tiny little, Zoom character squares that come through, and they just get, hundreds of them as far as, when it comes to auditions. It's changed. And so I'm not even sure if I really don't see my career going in that direction any longer. I mean, at first I
Yeah.
did. I really wanted to, continue acting. I wanted to really explore that area. But the more I'm podcasting, the more I'm realizing that I would love to be a host of, maybe some of these really cool documentaries or discovery shows,
Oh
that I'm
yeah.
watching. That would be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Um, I could be myself. I could, travel the United States, whatever it may be. There's so many different shows out there that I
Yeah.
would love to do. But yeah, the whole acting thing, it just seems like it's changed so much that it's getting further and further away from me. Let's put it that way.
Nah, I
It's
don't think
not
so.
it's not in
It is
my
for you. It is for you. For me, I'm the viewer. So no. But you, of course, your experience. The podcasting thing is leading you right in, and then you reappear as
that could be it too. I
Lara
mean,
Croft type character in a place you never expected.
there you
So
go. There you go. It's all in the matter of what we're gonna, envision and manifest, and what we're gonna go for. But if it happens, it'd be great, and I would absolutely embrace every single second of that.
I got a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Just on the podcast. Your curiosity and the curiosities behind the show. Just wondering if you could point to a couple things you'd wish you'd like to find out or discover or explore through using your podcast, areas you'd like to go into.
I mean, I really want to get more into, interviewing some of these really amazing female athletes. Um, I love to find out what drove them. I love to find out, as far as like where their life pivoted, and not just female athletes, to be honest with you. It's just people in general. I love to hear the pivotal moments,
Yeah.
so I love to get into those stories of, hey, okay, so your life didn't necessarily turn out, let's say, the way you planned, or maybe it did. And yet now you're not doing it. Are you comfortable with who you are and not doing that particular, let's say, career that you were in? I love to hear those stories, because I think what it is my life has pivoted so many times, and it's like, you got to be a quick pivot, and so I
Yeah.
like to hear other people's stories of, what they did, how they went down that road, how they dealt with certain situations. I don't know, maybe they had a career that was just like on fire, and all of a sudden something happened and it's just like, whoom, changed. I mean, like all those one-hit
Yeah.
wonders out there, if you think about it. um, whether it be music, whether it be film, television, just everyday life, I guess. I like to hear those kind of stories. And so that's why it's like, with my podcast, I want to bring more of those people in and
Yeah.
really get to what happened. But yet I like to keep it light, to be honest with you too. I don't like to go down too deep and too dark, not even dark, but
Yeah.
too deep. I want to keep it
It's
more,
fun.
yeah, I want to keep it more a little on the lighter side, more entertaining, to where people can laugh. I love to make people laugh, and so it's fun. Um, So that's where, this discovery, and I know the podcast, and I'm not stressing too much about it. It's like, I know it's starting to take on its own, is what's starting to happen. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's gonna like with you. I mean, I'm sure your podcast, maybe you started out and it's like, okay, this is where it's going to be.
It's a long ass road. It's a
I was just
long
going to
ass
say,
road.
is it exactly where you started out?
Yeah. Well, you know what? One thing I want to say about the show, which is kind of like the energy of the burst behind it, which is I was talking about your show as well, is like intense curiosity towards driving in. So when there's that energy behind it, it's the fuel. It's the fuel. I don't know where it's going to go and everything, but it's the fuel. Well, and on that, so let me say that. So I start the podcast 4 years ago. My mind is filled with wonder of who I might talk to. You mentioned, female athletes. How did I get in the position where I talked to the first female manager in the major leagues, the single A, Rachel Balkovich? How did I get to talk to Soroya Tinker, African-American pro hockey player in Toronto? How do I get to do these type of things? And it's like, you ask. You say, yeah. I'm like, really, like, I'm all right. Like, I'm super curious, a little strange, whatever. I'm going to ask and go. So that's where I don't know where I'm going. That's where.
But
and I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to you.
Yeah, but think about how exciting that is, though, not knowing really where you're going. I mean, that's kind of the excitement of life. It's like every day you wake up is a new day. Every day you wake up, you get to decide what type of day you're going to have and who you're going to meet, who you're going to talk to, whose podcast you're going to be on.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody, who's going to be on your podcast. And to me, that's what's so fun about life. And you've got to keep that lightheartedness, childlike, okay, what's the day going to bring? And so that's why I'm so excited about my podcast and where it's going, because of the fact that I got to be honest with you. It's like, I don't know the certain guests I'm going to have on in the next 6 months.
Yep.
And that's the fun of it.
Yep.
I'm excited about that. I'm excited about getting to know people and what their journey was and what drove them. And maybe some obstacles they hit and how they overcame those obstacles. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, we're all learning from each other. So if I can have something and I can have a guest on my show and it's going to touch the heart or it's going to trigger something in someone else to go, I never thought of it that way, that I've done my job.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to say one particular thing, with the big question of the show. And for listeners to the show, I've listened over 4 years. I've never given this opportunity, but I'm giving Lori Fetrick this opportunity, and she's listening patiently here. The big question I ask of this show, I'll tell you the whole rules. The big question of the show is, why is there something rather than nothing? However, I've always just asked that question of every guest. I have given you the ability to answer, which is A, or B, to say, fuck off, Ken, I'm not answering that. I've never done that. It's been over 4 years, Lori. I've held that gift in my pocket.
Anyway, so wait a minute. The question is why is there
or you can do both,
or you can do nothing?
Why is there something rather than
nothing? I mean, you got to think of that question kind of like, why is there something rather than nothing?
Yep.
Because if there was nothing, then it would be boring. If it was nothing, would we exist? Right. Why is there something? I mean, I would rather have something rather than nothing. It's kind of a fun question.
Yeah.
And you could get really deep with the question, or you could just keep it super lighthearted with the question. Or I could just say, fuck off, Ken. That's kind of a stupid question.
Yeah. You did both. You took option C. Lori, if there was one thing I knew about giving you two options, was that what is the option that includes both options? That was option C. It's great chatting with you. Lori, tell listeners where to find all your stuff. We've been talking about your stuff, but T-shirts, Chilling with
You,
Ice.
here we
Drop it
go.
all. Yeah.
All right, you got it. So you can find my Chillin' with Ice podcast pretty much on every channel where you listen to your podcasts. I do have a YouTube channel to where all my podcasts are videotaped. So if you want to watch me and the guests, they're all on my YouTube channel, which is Chillin' with Ice as well. I do have a Patreon account, and it's Chillin' with Ice at Patreon. I do have my merch store, which is icet-shirts.com. A lot of fun doing that kind of fun stuff. I do have American Gladiator stuff on there for a short time, limited. All my social medias are lori.ice.fetrick. Fetrick is F as in Frank, Etrick. I've got my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook. Ken, did you ever think that, I mean, back in the day, we just had a website, right? I have my website, lorifetrick.com. It has
I tell you,
everything.
I would be lying to you if in 1992 in Kingston, Rhode Island, in front of the TV watching American Gladiators, that the young scholar me said, you know what, someday there's going to be this podcast technology where humans are going to talk radio like back and forth to each other. And that ice that's on the screen that poor woman just ran 100 miles an hour into and fell back like a piece of crumpled paper, I'm going to talk to her.
So, Ken, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Why something rather than nothing?
So, thank you for asking. And my answer is very informed by Buddhism.
Okay.
So, it's a clanky question that I ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? Because whenever you ask it, the person has to form whatever the ideas of those two things are right off the bat. What is nothing? Like, what is it to think about nothing? Or what is something?
Nothing.
So within Buddhism, there's a piece for me that I think is pretty beautiful, that kind of where the nothing is beautiful. And this is what it is. So within Buddhist thinking, it's that there's no there behind everything, that we use names and there's phenomena around it, and we're describing these type of things. But when we try to grasp the thinginess ultimately, and we're grasping, we can't. There's no thing like right there. And the word isn't exactly the best, because in Buddhist philosophy, it's like the word shunyata, it means emptiness or not having inherent existence. It's not that we don't have the experiences that we do. It's just we get so grippy on the thinginess of things, and we grasp and attach. And that's kind of, for me, the basis of the Buddhist psychology, that we're gonna suffer as humans because we're made of bits and parts, and we feel and we hurt. But ultimately, what we don't want to do is to be grasping at all the things and thinginess all the time, because we're going to suffer more, or we're going to add on to our suffering. So for me, the nothingness is that there's no ultimate thinginess in the thing, and that's okay. And to try to not grasp for something that might not be there. How'd I do, Lori, on the answer to
that was good. That was good.
Oh,
I like that. I was right there with you, man. I went down that deep dark rabbit hole with you for a moment. I actually enjoyed it. I did. And that's a whole nother conversation as you get into that. It's like, as humans, we put meaning to everything. Everything we put meaning to. When actually something doesn't really mean anything.
I'll tell you the one experience. Everything I said, can get way out there. But I'll tell you the one thing when I talk about that is, finally, the experiential piece of this is what you can find out is a lot of folks do mindfulness, meditation. But one of the things that I've found, and I don't do it enough, so I'm not, but In meditating, what you'll find is if you take an object and you're meditating and looking at the object, and it can be whatever object, maybe one to kind of bring more peace to you, what you find out as you look, because you're looking at it and meditating and minding your breath, is that its contours, in its thinginess, in its solidity, it'll start to shift and move. And if you look at it, you don't have to think about it, but you can just observe it. And all the edges, they're not as solid. And I'm talking about over minutes and time. And it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the experience of, like, at the very least, it isn't as thingy as I thought, that there's this fraying at the edges, that it's, and for me, that's where the mystery is. So it's the physical experience of that as well. You digging on
So
that, Lori,
I,
too?
I'm gonna go there with you just for a moment, and that is right as you're describing this, okay? Because, I'm not quite sure where this comes from and how my brain really works. And since you're in psychology, maybe you can tell me this. But as you're describing what you were just talking about, it's like, okay, so you're meditating, and this is how my brain works. You're gonna laugh.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
so
no.
you're describing this, and you're like, okay, so you're meditating on an object, and you're looking at an object, and over time, as you're looking at this object and just trying to meditate on this, and the edges become blurry automatically, right? When you said that, I'm like, yeah, because your eyes are getting blurry, and your eyes are just getting tired, and your eyes are, and your brain starts playing like tricks on you, kind of thing. It's like if you look at yourself in the mirror long enough. There used to be a thing when what we would do with kids is you'd light a candle and you'd stare at yourself in the mirror for so long to where your face would start to kind of morph, and change a little bit. And you kind of wonder, you're like, okay, are these the tricks that your eyes are starting to play on you, or is this part of the brain process of actually what's happening when you stare at something for so long? So as you're describing that, it was like the edges become blurry and the edges become kind of like not so sharp and so crystal clear. I'm like, automatically I go to the physiological the physicalness of how the brain and how the body works.
That's the best counter. No, but Lori, what's so cool about it in this conversation, that's the powerful counter argument to what I was just saying. I was describing it in a particular way, but when you say it's true, when you say, you could say, okay, Ken, from a physiological point, it ain't the thing that's the thing is there. It's
Mm-hmm.
that these process, in a very, like, in that particular way, it's like you, the viewer, that is kind of spacing out, and that's completely legitimate, like, as well. So I see the instinct in you to kind of create the counter argument on this point, and that's why.
That's why I say it's interesting, because
Yeah.
that's just the way that my brain works.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
It's very physical. It's very factual. It's very, yeah, but
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, but yeah, okay, you finished? All right, but what about this?
which is like an amazing, fun conversation to have.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
love doing that and kind of going back and forth and listening to other people's views, and because that's how I learn as well. So that's the beauty of it, and that's how we all learn from one another. And I can only imagine, like, um, the fun conversation that you and I could get into.
Well, that's,
And
hey,
go down that deep road for a moment. It'd be a
hey,
great time.
tell you what, Lori, you don't have to. As far as my content, no requirement to be a completionist, because that'll take you 7.5 days of all of this, and I care about myself and love myself. I do not wish to foist all of that upon anybody. But no, there's some, I really, as a big fan, that and for the record, and on the audio tape, what have you, Ice is indeed my favorite gladiator.
Thank you
There's never
so
been
much.
anybody close.
Oh,
That's
you're so
so.
sweet.
So it's super exciting in that way. But really, I tell you, it's been really nice to talk to you, like, in the creative elements too, because there's something about the intimacy of listening to a podcast, right, where,
Right.
like, you're seeing the brain and hearing the brain, and being like, oh, it's cool to kick around this type
Mm-hmm.
of stuff. And I get excited for you on the podcast to be going, okay, like all of a sudden you realize in creating podcasts, it's like you look around, like I look around right now, right? And I'm like, holy shit, like I'm the guy that's going to go ask for the interview. There ain't anybody else fucking around here. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it is me. And, that I think that can be so fun going into that and being like, you know what? I really want to learn from the brain and the words of this person and just let them,
Yeah. And
do
it's
it.
fun.
So,
It's a lot of fun. And this technology, even though it's, in the social media age where everything is moving super fast and it's instant gratification and everybody is like, okay, next, move on, move on, move on. There are some other elements like podcasting, which has opened up in the world, and it has just allowed everyone to connect with each other and learn from each other even more so than it was back in the day. So that's also a very exciting part. There are good and bads, especially, as we get a little older, I find myself saying things like, oh my God, that's something my mom would say. Or my dad
oh,
or something. But,
oh goodness.
yeah, with
Yes.
technology and how it's moving and so quickly, but podcasting has definitely opened the door for more connection. And it's just exciting and it's fun.
Yeah, rocket. Everybody, make
Yeah.
sure to check out. Make sure to spend your time chilling with Ice, and
Thank you.
like I said, if you want the quick highlight reel, best of Ice, American Gladiators, just a real thrill.
Thank you, Ken. I so
Great
appreciate it.
chatting with you. Yeah, love chatting with you, and we'll chat soon.
This is Something Rather Than Nothing.
And listeners, to stay connected with us and our guests, visit somethingratherthannothing.com. Join our mailing list for exclusive updates and access to guest-created art. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform. People really read that shit. Your support helps us reach more listeners and spread our community across the planet. This is a global show, and we like to give a shout out to our many listeners across the world, including many listeners in Canada, Spain, Germany, UK, Argentina, Brazil, India, Thailand, and so many more places. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast for behind the scenes content. And the best way to help the show is to tell your friends about us. If you love it, they'll love it too. Tell your friends who love it. We love you. This is Something Rather Than Nothing Podcast.